This is Ninfa Trejo, and I'm here with Sarah N. Long, and we are in Anaheim, California, at the ALA annual conference. She's agreed to be interviewed. This interview is part of a Capturing Our Stories oral history program of retired or retiring librarians. It is one of Lawrence Roy's American Library Association presidential initiatives. This recording will be the property of the ALA and may be published and used for scholarly research. Today is June 27th of 2008. So, Sarah, what is your name?
My name is Sarah Ann Sanders Long Sager. That's all of my names, but I just go by Sarah Long.
Good. What is your current position?
I'm the Executive Director of the North Suburban Library System in Wheeling, Illinois.
Can you give me a brief history of how you became a librarian in your career?
Yes.
You have a brilliant career. So.
Oh, well, thank you. I'll give you the brief version.
Okay.
I always wanted to be a teacher. In the third grade, I remember taking mental notes of Mrs. Carlisle, my third grade teacher. I thought she was an excellent teacher, and I wanted to be just like her. But as I grew up and as my life unfolded, a lot of events intervened. First of all, I was living in Atlanta, Georgia. That's where I was born, and my mother before me. And it was at a time when there was a lot of difficulty with the schools and with integration. And because of the integration initiatives, it seemed as though Atlanta public schools would be closed between my junior and senior year in high school. That would be, somewhere around 1958. I'd always taken extra classes, and so I was able to graduate a year ahead, and I immediately went on to college. And in college, I majored in education because I still wanted to be a teacher. But on teaching practice, I was in an overprivileged school in Sandy Springs, Georgia, where the children had everything. This was the 6th grade. And I don't know where my supervising teacher was, not around. And as is my wont, I tried all these weird and wonderful things, but long story short, I lost control of the class. They were crazy. When April Fool's Day, I came in early and put lots of work on the board and told them that they had to finish all of this work by 9 o'clock. And then shortly before 9 o'clock, I said, April Fool, you don't have to finish. Well, silly me, I had set the wrong tone for the day. And before the day was over, many things happened to me. And I was just so silly as a teacher. When we went out to recess as a group, they ran away. They just ran around the schoolyard, but it frightened me. So I thought, what am I going to do? By that time I was married. I had 2 children. I had to work. I needed a job. But someone told me that I could get a fellowship to go to library school. So I thought, well, I could do that. I've always loved to read. I'm sure I could be a librarian. So I agreed to be a school librarian for 3 years. I enrolled in the graduate library school at Emory University, also in Atlanta. And a year or so later, I was a school librarian. And I loved that job. I loved being with the kids. I finally figured out what I did wrong on teaching practice, that it's important to set a tone that establishes the teacher as the adult in charge and not as a pal, and that you had to really keep order in order to get anywhere in a teaching situation. So my first job, as I say, was with the Atlanta Public Schools as a school librarian. I did that for 3 years, and then my husband, at that time, was an academic, and he was interested in getting his PhD in England. And so we moved to England, and I had a terrible time getting a job. First of all, I was a foreign national. Second of all, the only experience I had was working in a school library, and they didn't have school libraries in England in the same way. But there was a job advertised at a teacher training college. It was called the College of St. Matthias. And so I applied for the job, and I went to the interview, and there was an older woman who interviewed me. And she asked me for a sample of my handwriting. And I thought, remember, this is in the late 60s. I thought, cool, she's into handwriting analysis. Oh, no, no, no. She was interested in library hand, you know, where you write on the catalog cards and so on. Somehow, I think because I was sufficiently obscure to her, she gave me the job. And so I worked in a teacher training college in Bristol, England for, I think, 3 years or so. Then I moved back to the U.S. My husband and I were having difficulty, and I got a job at the State Library of Ohio. And I worked there for a couple of years. I was the consultant for children's services, and I traveled all over Ohio. I liked that job too. I didn't know much about being a children's librarian in a public library, but what I found out is a consultant, you really didn't have to have all the experience yourself. You had to be a good listener. And so if you could listen to the people, what they had to say in Library A and B and C, that when you got to Library D, chances are they wanted to know something that you heard about in Library A or B. And so you just had to have good listening skills and a bit of a memory, and you could be able to pass on the wisdom that you had learned from others. So that was a very useful and interesting experience for me.
Was this something that you learned in library school, or you learned through working in different places?
In library school, I had sort of focused on working with children's literature, but I had not taken any courses on state library work or being a consultant. So some of it I had background in, but some of it I had just picked up on the job, as it were, and being an adult in the world, that I had learned different strategies for getting along with people. So at the State Library, being a consultant, I wrote a newsletter, and always in my career, writing has been very important to me, and I enjoyed that very much. While I worked at the State Library of Ohio, one of the things I got involved in was a grant. It was 1974 or 5, and the celebration of the bicentennial here in the U.S. was a very big topic. And I wanted children's librarians and librarians working in public schools to do cooperative projects. And so I hatched this idea with some other people that if we could get a little bit of money, we could have a series of workshops around Ohio and help librarians from these two venues to work together, sort of a cooperative project. I was able to get a little grant from the state of Ohio, from the Bicentennial Commission, and we painted up a bookmobile, and we held these workshops, 13 original workshops for the 13 original colonies around the U.S., and that was a very exciting project, and I enjoyed that. But one of the people who I came in contact with during that period was Don Sager. He was the director of the Public Library of Columbus and Franklin County. It has a different name now, but that was its name then. And he asked me if I would like to come and he was newly appointed as the director of the Columbus Public Library, and he asked me if I'd like to come and be the coordinator of children's services. By that time, my family had come back to live with me, my first husband and my 2 children in Columbus, and I thought it would be better if I didn't travel so much. So I accepted the job, and I worked as the coordinator of children's and young adult services at that library for 3 or 4 years, until about 1982, I would say. And at that point, I had an opportunity to move up into the directorship in the library world. An opening came available at the Fairfield County District Library, which is about 30 or 40 miles south of Columbus. a friend of mine, Hannah McCauley, who was quite a mover and shaker in Ohio libraries, was the chair of the search committee, and she invited me to apply for the job. I didn't know much about directing the library, but Don Sager was the director of the library where I worked, and I had admired his work very much. I had 2 years' worth of board packets, and I got the job and started a new job as a director of a library. It made me very nervous at first because I was used to working with children.
Mm-hmm.
And while I've always been able to talk easily, I got so nervous that I would write out these little cards for opening ceremonies. Hello, my name is Sarah Long. I am the director of the library. I was very nervous about coming across as adult and in charge and not being a children's person. All of my friends had warned me that I would have to give up my feather boas and my cowboy boots and other crazy costumes that I had adopted as a children's librarian. And I did for a while, but now I'm back to dressing up again. Anyway, I got along pretty well being a public library director. We were in a building project and we got grants to do things, have a lot of programs, and it was a very exciting time for me. I did that for a couple of years. Meanwhile, my children were growing up, and I had the opportunity to move ahead myself. And so my next job was as the director of the Dauphin County Library System in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania.
What do you see the difference between being a librarian, children's librarian, and move up into administration so easily? And so what was the difference for you, and what was the most difficult part of it?
Well, I think for me personally, part of the issue was, as I said before, it was seeing myself in an adult role. I sort of had figured out how to be an adult with children. I learned that on the bad side of that on teaching practice. But moving up and being the director of the library, I needed to grow into that position of being in charge of an adult operation. At my first job in being a director, we had this new building, and I was so overawed at the fact that I was in charge of the building that one night I heard sirens in this small town. This was Lancaster, Ohio, and I was convinced the library was burning down. I don't know why but I had to get in my car and go make sure the library was okay. I was just overawed with this responsibility. So part of it was the responsibility of it all. I think actually working with youth is pretty good preparation for being an administrator. If you can organize a program for kids, you can certainly organize a board meeting. Now, I'm not meaning to put down board members, but it's a similar kind of thing. If you can organize volunteers to work with a children's program, you can recruit people to help you in any kind of management exercise you'd like to mention. So I think that if you can work with young people, you can just about work with anybody. And children's librarians are legendary for being able to find the resources and convince people to help them for harebrained projects. And a lot of what you do as an administrator at some level can be considered a harebrained project. So I think that in many ways I was well suited to move up into library administration.
Tell me, what was your thinking? I know you were the president of the American Library Association. Why did you want to be the president of ALA? And before that, what prepared you to run for ALA president?
Well, I wasn't one of these people who had always wanted to be ALA president. I've been a member of ALA for many years, and I came to all the conferences and I participated and was chair of committees and things like that. I remember when I was the director of the Dauphin County Library System in Harrisburg, someone called me up and said, I know, it was a recruiter, called me up and said, we're looking for someone to be the director of the Multnomah County Library in Portland, Oregon. And he called me because I was then president of PLA, the Public Library Association.
So how they came about the PLA? I didn't.
I think the way I got to be PLA president was I had worked on a lot of PLA committees, and that was a very active and growing time for PLA. And I'm sure I just knew people who were on the nominating committee, and I was one of the people in the active circle, and so they nominated me. And so one of the things that happens when you're in that active circle is that your name comes to mind. A lot of people who do a good job in their hometown, in their home state, in their home association, they might come to conferences, but unless they're really involved, they aren't thought of. So a lot of it is kind of being there. I think Woody Allen or somebody said that. So I think that I got the PLA presidency because I had been active in the association and was well liked enough. And I enjoyed being PLA president. It was a time when the federal legislation for the LSCA was being reauthorized, and I was very interested in that. Joey Roger was the executive director of PLA, and I remember she put together a symposium where we thought in depth about the federal role in library circles, and that was very important to me, and I think it helped PLA to kind of sharpen its focus about our legislative efforts. So about the ALA, that's kind of a funny story. As I say, I had never thought of myself as ALA president, but I got a call from a friend of mine who was the chair of the nominating committee, and she said, this was in December of 1978, I think. No, I'm wrong. 1998, by about 20 years I was wrong. And she said, I'll tell you the truth, Sarah. We have someone else who's agreed to run for the ALA presidency. And I've talked to 25 other people. And I can only give you 24 hours to think about this because we've had this other person since October. It's now December. And I have to have somebody do it. You do a good job. And so I talked to my husband, Don Sager, and I talked to my board president, and they both agreed this was a good thing. And I decided kind of overnight that I could do it and it would be a good thing.
Obviously, you knew all the ins and outs of ALA by that time because you were in the council already of ALA.
Actually, I wasn't in council,
No?
but I'd been very active in PLA, and I had worked in a lot of states. I had worked in Georgia. I had worked in Ohio. In Ohio, I traveled around the whole state, and I knew a lot of people. And I worked in Pennsylvania. I'd been active in the Pennsylvania Library Association. And by this time, I had also worked in Oregon as the director of the Multnomah County Library. So I knew a lot of people. And also, I am my mother's daughter. My mother was older when I was born, and she brought me up with old-fashioned manners. And one of those things is writing thank you notes. So everywhere I met people, you know, I would write to them and the things that people don't do anymore, but now I send email notes.
Right.
And so I think the reason I won, I don't think I was expected to win, was because I had worked in a lot of states and I knew a lot of people, and I had, for whatever reason, made a good impression.
That's great. And I know you were one of my favorites ALA presidents.
Oh,
but
thank you.
I think that, what do you think is your legacy in terms of ALA, you know, as president?
It's funny. I would say the cynical side of me says that no president has much of a legacy. You're on the stage so briefly. You have a year of being president-elect in which you're crazed, as I was, with what you're going to do on your year. In your year, it flashes by, and then it's June or early July, and you're a past president, and you have a year of being a past president. And then after that, they take the credit card away, and it's over. But the thing about it is, the things that I think have lasted from my presidency, and who knows how long they will last, is I had a sister library initiative, reaching out to librarians in Mexico and in other countries, and there's some of that that lingers on, and some succeeding presidents have taken that on. I think Carol Bray, I can't remember her last name.
Casiero.
Casiano, yes. She took on the Sister Library Initiative and really gave that a boost, especially with librarians in Latin America. My Libraries Build Community theme, I was the last president to have a theme in a formal way. I noticed at this conference that continues with a work day, which pleases me very much. Some of the other things that I worked on, I don't think they have lasted in the sense of being institutionalized, but I hope those initiatives touched people at a particular time. But being ALA a president is a wonderful experience. It certainly changed my life. It was extremely affirming. It helped me as a person. But my advice to would-be ALA presidents is to have a good time and don't take it too seriously.
Okay. So what do you think that the challenges for librarians are now?
I think the big challenge for librarians right now is being nimble. I think that our world has changed so much in the time that I've been a librarian. Remember, I talked about library hand. This is when cards were written for the card catalog with a certain penmanship. I mean, that's laughable now. And young librarians graduating today don't even know what that means.
No.
And so now I think, for example, we ought to think about a library not cataloging anything in the traditional way at all. You know, I think maybe Dewey might be on the way out. We have tagging now. This is kind of, I'm speaking heresy here, and I'm speaking to be provocative, but I think librarianship has to think about those people born after after 1980, because those people are very different from you and me. They have grown up with gaming. They are into multitasking. They do things very differently, and there's some evidence they even think differently. And the library has to be a very different place for them.
So probably changes are the most challenging thing that we need to change,
Yes.
and we need to change very rapid, very fast.
Very quickly. One of the penchants, I think, for librarians is that we like things to be correct and accurate. But as a person on my staff said, it's now constant beta. You know that term, beta, means that it's in a test phase.
Right.
He said it's never going to be any more than beta. Just jump in and do it. You don't quite understand it, but push some buttons and try it out and see if you can get it to work. And so I try to tell myself that. It's constant beta. Get used to it.
The other things that you may not credit yourself, but you have also known and probably mentor a lot of people. Do you see yourself as a mentor and as a mentor? How you've been working as a mentor for other librarians?
I love the opportunity to talk to people about their career. I guess it's the mother in me that I'm very flattered when someone asks me their advice, and I give it to them. Yes. And I'm not sure that my words are, that people always take my advice, but, for what it's worth, it's offered with a generous spirit, and I hope that my example and my words have been useful to some people.
So, would you like to discuss some of the enriching experiences in your career, during your career?
Recent experiences. Well, for me personally, one of the things that happened during my presidency, and I didn't know it was happening, virtually, I was gone from my job for 3 years. And during that period of time, the people who reported to me became a self-managed team. And they really did most of my work. And so when I came back, I guess I thought I was going to do my old job. And they were like, what? We like what we're doing now, so what are you going to do? Well, I was pretty upset. I cried a little bit and looked around, and then one of these people said to me, so why don't you pursue the things that you are interested in? And the things I'm interested in are talking to people. I'm interested in library marketing and in public relations. And so I changed my job very dramatically. So for the last couple of years, I've written a column every week for a local newspaper about libraries. I've gotten into podcasting. I just finished my 100th podcast with Michael Stevens, actually. And for 10 years, I've had a cable TV show every month. So my career has been an opportunity for me to do the things that I think are my talents and the things that are easy for me. And I would encourage people to find that spot in their career and not try to do the things that are the hardest, but the things that are the easiest for them. More significantly for the organization where I work is we were simultaneously working to become a learning organization. This is an organization that's a lot flatter, a lot more emphasis on shared decision making. And so while we're a small staff, we only have about 30 employees. There's a lot of most of the decisions are made by more than one person. They're certainly not all made by me. And because of that, I think we've been able to accomplish much more. I think we have an excellent staff that is, I think these individuals feel very self-empowered. I think they really like their jobs because they're in charge.
There's a collected wisdom.
It is.
Yeah.
I think it's been very good for us. But I don't know that I would have been smart enough or brave enough to have given away so much power on my own. ALA, bless its sweet little pointy head, because I was president, I was gone. And so I lived through giving away my job, and when I came back, it was easy just not to take it back. So that learning organization experience has been very powerful.
So what is some of the things what was the most controversial time during your career in the information world? And did you do anything to contribute to hinder or that have an impact?
Well, during my ALA presidency, it was at the height of a lot of controversy about filtering and about ALA's stance on filtering. I remember a significant conversation in my own kitchen with one of my husband's sons, and he had his first child in his arms. And he knew about the controversy with ALA being against any sort of filtering of the internet and so on. And I remember him saying to me, but Sarah, why do you want Joshua, his brand new baby, to see pornography? And so defending ALA's position on access to information.
It was CIPA, right?
Yes, it was a very difficult time. I remember one time being on MSNBC from some studio in Chicago, being in a cramped little, I don't know, some kind of box where they recorded with a thing in my ear, sitting on a little stool, being interviewed by some reporter, and they had someone taking the other side, a librarian from Oregon, if I remember, who was saying that libraries should filter, that we should be much more responsible for the information. So that was very hard for me. I certainly approved of ALA's position, but it's very hard to be the point person and to be pummeled with those kinds of questions.
Well, you find that intellectual freedom is important to us, but I think that, why do you think that people are so against that? I mean, because intellectual freedom is not, liberty is not give you the freedom to do bad things, but intellectual freedom is to give you the right to know.
Yes. Well, I'm no sociologist, but I think a lot of the people who are for censorship adopt a stance like that out of their own fear. and sort of out of some enhanced thought that they know best. It just seems foreign to me. I have my own insecurities, but I'm willing for you to have your insecurities too, and for you to make your own decision, and I would not deign to be the one to say what you can look at. I can look at it, but you can't? Doesn't make a bit of sense to me.
Right. How would you like to, an advice for new librarians? What would be your best or one of your advice? I know you have a lot of probably advice to give, but what, and having overcome so many different careers, because within librarianship, I think the best thing about librarianship is that you can change different environments. Like you can be in art, you can be in different disciplines, and you've obviously been very successful in administration and dealing with people. And I think the most difficult for any administrator is dealing with the human factor.
Yes.
What advice would you give to librarians to have acquire in those communication skills and those the philosophy of our librarianship, which is the right to know? How do you will present that to new librarians now, being information at the level that it is now?
Well, that's a very hard question, Ninfa. I guess what I would say to new librarians is a couple of things. One of the things I've learned, especially in my current job, is if you don't know, ask for some time. I mean, isn't that a good reference librarian approach? Well, I'm not sure I understand about that, but I can research that and I'll get back to you. The other thing I would say, on the other hand, is to follow your instincts and to remember that these are other people that you're dealing with. In a management position, oftentimes you're in the difficult spot of you having to protect the organization, and sometimes that feels like it's not humane. But if you're the administrator, you do have to protect the organization. But as I was getting around to saying, a lot of times what I find myself doing is I hire a consultant. I call in experts. I look to people who have trod on this road before, and so that I will protect the organization and do the best for the organization and bring the wisdom that I can find, the best wisdom, to bear on the situation. Librarians are employers, and when you get into an employment situation, you can get into many difficult situations, and one has to have policies and to be careful and so on and so forth. I would put a strong oar in for kindness and for listening to others and for trying to see things from other people's point of view. And I think a lot can be helped by this approach and by trying to put yourself in another person's shoes, even if you have bad news to deliver, and whatever you can do to ease the path. So many times when you look back in history, you can see where countries got into trouble because somebody's pride was hurt. And if you can protect people's pride, if you can give people a graceful way out, oftentimes that goes a long way.
Thank you so much, Sarah.
Thank you, Ninfa. It was a pleasure to talk to you
It was
today.
a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.